We're back into the action, people, from the break on the hottest show on the streets, the #1 forum for Crimson Tide football news, notes, and information. We got the family affair in the building, the man, the boots on the ground, the legend when it comes down to recruiting. Nobody does it like this dude right here. We got Justin Smith in the building of Touchdown Alabama Magazine talking 2021 recruiting. Justin, my man, I can see your face right now again. Happy to have you back, brother.
It's always great to come on, Steven.
It's a fantastic having you on here, Justin. Well, of course, on Sunday, the first piece of big news, five-star target for Alabama on that defensive line, Damon Payne, as I should say, is going to, make his commitment, going to let it be known where he intends on committing to and hopefully go to school to, after his senior season ends in high school. So when you look at Damon Payne, where does Alabama stand with him? You've talked about what you like the most about his game, but where does Alabama now stand with Damon Payne as Sunday's approaching?
Well, I still think they remain in a good position that they have already been in throughout his recruitment, now being included in his top 10 heading into that decision on Sunday. So I still feel they are in that great position with them being among his top schools. I think the Tide is in a great position also because of where their program is at as a whole heading into his Sunday decision. When you look at the Tide throughout this pandemic, I know a lot of fans were agitated with the way the Tide's 2021 recruiting class looked like it was going when the pandemic first started and they started canceling things with the Tide only having one commitment at that moment in Deontay Lawson. I think things have sort of changed when it comes to the Tide's recruiting efforts here, because when you look at the way teams have to recruit now, you have to recruit totally virtually. So you have to sell your program. With some schools, when they host guys for visits, they try to sell their program. They try to sell the athletic buildings that they have, their field, the atmosphere, the fans. You don't have that right now. So the biggest thing that you have to your advantage is what your program has been able to produce. I think that is the Tide's biggest advantage now for any recruit in this 2021 recruiting class. The Tide's reputation pretty much stands for itself. You can sell that program without having a face on it in terms of the field, the new locker rooms. Yeah, that is a plus for the Tide, but also the fact that what Nick Saban has been able to do, that's a huge plus for the Tide in this virtual recruiting game.
Now, Justin, of course, Kyle Flood has been incredible on this trail when you look at the offensive line. He's trying to get the #1 group in the country. You look at J.C. Latham, bringing him in here, getting his commitment. The Brockemeyer boys, Tommy and James Brockemeyer, getting both of those two in here. Terrence Ferguson out of Georgia, the 4-star, he's down here. I know a lot of fans are talking about, is Amarius Mims? Is Amarius Mims the next one? People like him. People talk about him, but you have seen other guys that Alabama's potentially targeting. If it doesn't look at Mims, if it doesn't get Mims, who are some of the other guys that Saban's like, we're liking this guy too, or we're liking this group of guys also?
Well, I broke a lot of those guys down on the last episode of The Process. Be sure to check that out on the latest episode of The Process that we dropped on yesterday. But there are a couple of other guys who the Tide is recruiting in this 2021 recruiting class at that offensive line position. Of course, they have the 4 verbal commitments at the moment, but they are still recruiting a couple of guys. Amarius Mims, of course, is a guy who is going to announce his commitment on August 15th. There's Tristan Lade, the 5-star offensive tackle out of Virginia, who dropped that top 5 recently. He doesn't have a commitment date set, but he did include the Tide in that top 5. You have Jagger Burden, a 4-star offensive lineman out of Kentucky to look at. You have Eric Cage, another offensive lineman to look at. You have so many other guys the Tide is still recruiting at that offensive line position. Ross Major Lee, a guy out of California. So it's a good group of guys the Tide is still recruiting at that offensive line position. So I think it's very interesting when you look at the way they are trying to close out this 2021 offensive line class, and just based off the amount of guys they are still in contact with. Of course, they want to add at least one more guy to this class to close out possibly the best offensive line class ever, but are we possibly looking at them adding 6 offensive linemen in this class? Just looking at the roster, it's a high possibility that they will lose 4 offensive linemen at the end of next season for sure. You also have to put in play the transfer portal, so I can definitely see a 6 offensive linemen possibly coming into play in the future.
You're looking at Alabama's offensive line class, folks. As Justin just mentioned here, Kyle Flood trying to make things good for one Bryce Young and one Paul Tyson in the future as the big boys trying to get them in here for 2021. But we're live here on In My Own Words. If you're just tuning into the show on a Friday, got the man right here, Justin Smith, the lead scouting and recruiting analyst for Touchdown Alabama magazine, talking Crimson Tide recruiting for 2021. Now, Justin, another thing you mentioned is the defensive line, and not just in terms of the defensive line, more so defensive ends and defensive tackle commitments. Now, I know Coach Saban wants to continue getting outside linebackers. Sal Sunseri loves the range, the quick twitchy, the pass rush ability that you can get from the outside linebacker position, but just defensive tackle, defensive end. Talk about how, Saban and this group, and of course Freddie Roach, want to get more so of those guys.
Yeah, I think their attention is going to turn there a lot heading down the stretch here. You have a verbal commitment from Anquan Barnes, the 3-star defensive tackle out of Montgomery Alabama, in Lee High School. But this is a kid who's a great pickup for the Tide in that 2021 recruiting class. They could quite possibly add Damon Payne this weekend. That will be a great pickup. But looking at their defensive line class here moving forward in the 2021 recruiting cycle, you look at other guys who they are targeting here heading down the stretch. Of course, you have Monkel Goodwine, a 4-star defensive end out of Maryland. You have the in-state targeting 4-star defensive tackle Tim Keenan III, who the Tide is still pushing for here. You have some other guys tied into that mix. A guy who recently released a top 6, and Tyrion Ingram Dawkins is another guy to pay attention to. So there's a lot of different targets on the Tide's defensive line board here moving forward. Shamar Turner is another guy I'll pay attention to out of Texas. So I think the Tide will pick up their push for a couple of defensive linemen heading into the next couple of months here, with them only having one verbal commitment there at this moment.
Tide definitely going to look at trying to get some of those defensive line players into the program. But, Justin, one thing you and I discussed before coming on the show is the idea of the official and unofficial visits. I remember you were talking to Blake Brockemeyer, about this and kind of touch on how there may not be as many visits as a lot of these young recruits and their families would like to have due to the pandemic, due to, coaches trying to push these commitments in quickly. Speak to how, there may not be as many visits that we would like to see happen.
Well, I think everything is in the air at this moment. The season is basically in the air when you just look at the college football.
I'm trying to keep my fingers crossed here, Justin.
Yes. Just when you look at the college football season, but the current recruiting dead period, which puts a ban on all in-person visits, whether that is a unofficial or official visit, that dead period is currently extended through August 31st. So we know there will be no visits during the month of August. And just with the season going on, we look at the Tide football recruiting and the amount of guys they bring in on a weekly basis for a home game. You're talking about 50 to 100 recruits every home game. How are you going to bring that amount of guys into a stadium at this point in time when there's so much uncertainty going on? So I don't think there will be any visits this upcoming season. Most likely there will be a prediction that I will make today just based off how everything is set up right now. Things could change. We could go into a situation where it may be limited amount of visits, possibly 5 or 6 guys you get on campus every week, but things are not looking well as far as trying to get a large amount of guys on campus every week for a visit.
Now, going into next week, you're going to be on the road quite a bit, scouting a whole bunch of athletes on this trail here. And 2 of the guys you're going to be looking at, possibly, we're thinking about, Terrion Arnold and Deontay Lawson. Arnold in Tallahassee, Florida, and Lawson here in Mobile. Talk about what you look forward to getting down to both of those areas, seeing both of these young men, seeing both of these athletes, and just kind of understanding their whole process in this and scouting them.
Well, yeah, the first thing is this is probably the most enjoyable part of my job, getting a chance to get out there and
I envy you, man.
getting a chance to contact guys and interact with them in person and get a chance to know them a lot better. We have a ton of content coming this week when it comes to one of the Tide's linebacker commits and Deontay Lawson. So, some unique and interactive content that I think a lot of Tide fans will definitely be excited about. Also, it's always great to get a chance to evaluate guys in person. Of course, you like to watch film and do things like that, but nothing beats in-person action, whether that's practice. That's the only way to get a true evaluation. So I'm definitely excited and looking forward to it.
Well, folks, he is Justin Smith, the lead scouting and recruiting analyst for Touchdown Alabama magazine. Be sure to follow this young man right here. He is out there on the grind, coast to coast, state to state, city to city, town to town, scouting, recruiting, taking notes, building relationships with these young players and their families. As I've said before, he's got a cot, pillow, blanket, bed, probably got a bottle of Gatorade in every recruit's house. Check out his show, The Process, on YouTube, which comes out every Tuesday and Thursday on the channel. Justin, as always, man, it was awesome having you on. Be safe, man. Be good. Well, folks, we're going to get a chance to take the next break here on the show. Don't touch that dial, because when we come back, we dive back into your phone calls, your tweets, your thoughts, your questions, your concerns. Bring them in. Let's have a dialogue after this.
T-Town Menswear in the University Mall in Tuscaloosa. Touchdown Alabama magazine is Alabama football's premier publication. A subscription to Touchdown Alabama magazine is the perfect gift for any Alabama fan. For exclusive news and information, recruiting updates, a free annual print magazine, and more, go to touchdownalabama.com and click join. Only $5.95 per month, or pay $49.95 for a full year subscription. That's a saving of almost $22. Go to touchdownalabama.com today and roll Tide.
Thank you for watching Touchdown Alabama Magazine's YouTube channel. To continue to get the best in Alabama football content, subscribe here and turn on your notifications to stay connected with the hottest shows covering your Crimson Tide.